Welcome back, FCS Fans Nation, to FCS Sundays, The Overtime. We are going to roll through your weekly top 25 recap and show you how all the teams did, 1 through 25. It's a quick hitter, hopefully about a minute per team-ish, so this will end about 25. And man, Kyler, what a different week it is this week compared to last week. Last week we had, 11 top 25 losses, four of which happened in the top 10. This week, not a single loss in the top 10, and only a few losses altogether throughout the top 25, and most of them to other ranked teams. So a very less parity this week, I guess is the best way to put it.
I think I saw it on the FCS, Fans Nation podcast that, we've seen a lot of parity. It's eventually going to line itself up. The FCS gods are not going to be brutal to us every single week. Eventually it's going to line itself up. The powers are going to end up being still the powers. Now there's going to be a little bit of parity overall compared to maybe what we saw in the fall or something like that. But we're not gonna see too many weeks like we did last week.
Yeah, nope. And you know what? Let's hop right into this week. And that would be number 25 Delaware from the CAA getting their first go at it. They get a win, 37-0 versus Maine. And man, to start with Delaware and just how this game started, taking the opening kickoff for a touchdown. I mean, that is how you want your spring season to start if you're Delaware. And you rolled through Maine, who I know isn't quite what they used to be, but still, I mean, at the end of the day, quality win, and they handled their business and showed very little rust.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't look great in the passing department, but I don't remember the last time Delaware had just a fantastic offense anyway. What they did was they kind of played old school Delaware, to where even this is a Delaware that Eastern played in the championship 2010. They just brutalized you on defense. Maine couldn't get anything going. I mean, their passing game was just horrendous. Their rushing game was just horrendous. When you're only averaging 2.3 yards throughout the whole game, you're not averaging a first down. Delaware, hats off to them. They took care of business. Maine offensively, Maine defensively, all of it did not look good. Delaware looks like a top 25 team.
Yep, expect them to move up in the rankings. Then we had two teams tied at number 23 this week. One was Monmouth out of the Big South, who still hasn't played. And the second is Southeastern Louisiana, Sela, taking it to in-state rival McNeese. A big win at home, 25-20. Now, in my opinion, McNeese is still kind of a decent team. I know they've just, it feels like every week we're covering some team that's beating them. So they keep moving down the rankings. But at the end of the day, if you're a 23 team in the country and you're able to beat an in-state team at home 25-20, I'd say at the end of the day, this is a good win for Sela.
Yeah, this is a win where if you're a top 25 team, you need to have. Now, it's different because when you do play in type of in-state rivals, there's always a little bit of a chance that even a team who's worse off than you has a chance for an upset. They play you. They want to beat you. All of the teams on the team, the game's more important to them. But Sela, after that battle with Sam Houston State last week, and then coming back and, beating McNeese, they did what they had to do. They proved that they are still a top 25 team, and overall was a good win.
Yep. Speaking of good wins, at number 22, the Eastern Washington Eagles just handled their business against NAU, a team that many people wanted to see what Northern Arizona was going to be this year. They sneak out a win against Southern Utah, and then they get blown out by Eastern Washington. Eagles took care of business. I mean, that's the only thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of pieces NAU still needs to find before they can really compete with the top echelon. Even though Eastern Washington's maybe been down in the last few years, we are a very athletic, explosive team. And when we're playing defenses that maybe don't have good schemes or maybe they don't match us athletic-wise, Eastern Washington's going to exploit that every single time. And this was just one of those mismatches on paper. NAU's still young. They got a young coach. Over the next few years, they'll get better, but Eastern Washington showed it's still a couple of years out from NAU being really anything more than a bottom to mid-level team.
Yep. Then we have two more teams tied at number 20, one being Wofford. Wofford's game against East Tennessee State was postponed. And then we have number 20, the South Dakota Coyotes have to be honest, not that bad of a loss to North Dakota, who is number 4. And it was at UND. If you're South Dakota, you didn't really hang in there. Your quarterback took a ton of hits. But I think this speaks more to how good North Dakota is. So I guess we'll probably talk about it more when we get to the number 4 spot. But I mean, what did you at least see out of South Dakota?
They're North Dakota on more possessions than pretty much any other team's been able to so far. So that shows a little bit of promise. At least, maybe South Dakota is going to be able to hang in there with some of the other teams. But yeah, we'll cover North Dakota, when we're talking about the 4 spot, because I'm just waiting for North Dakota to be North Dakota.
Speaking of teams that became their teams, number 19, Idaho, loss at home against UC Davis in the Kibbie Dome. I mean, for me in this one, Idaho down some players, but everybody's down players with COVID and injuries and everything. UC Davis showed little signs of rust, and at the end, they just outpaced the Vandals, taking the lead for the first time in the fourth quarter, and Idaho just had no answer.
Yeah, let's give a little bit of a shout out to Hunter Rodriguez in his first, real start. He was able to kind of do whatever he wanted with Idaho. He didn't miss. I mean, he wasn't bombing it down the field from what I saw in the little bit of highlights, but he was able to get it down the field. He was able to extend plays, move the ball. Idaho has some flaws. Some of it is they're just not getting up for games that they don't care about. It seems like they've done this ever since they made the drop back down. Seems like every other week it's a completely different Idaho team. So I don't know what to expect from Idaho. I predicted them to go 4-2. They're most likely going to go 4-2 now.
I think it's going to be interesting because the one story to take away from this is the Big Skies AQ bid here. Eastern wins. UC Davis was receiving votes. You'd expect them to probably get in the top 25 now. Does Idaho hold on to a top 25 spot? Maybe at 25, UC Davis 24, Eastern maybe takes Idaho's spot at 19. Like, there's going to be a weird bottom of the barrel, bottom of the top 25 battle the rest of the season. UC Davis still has to play Eastern, still has to play Weber. So it'll be interesting to see how those 3 teams fall out in the ranking after Eastern beating or losing Idaho last week, then Idaho losing to UC Davis this week. Glad I'm not a pollster. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, right now South Dakota probably drops out and UC Davis comes in, and each one of those teams is from 20 to 25. No better.
Yeah. Next up, UT Chattanooga win at the Citadel, 25-24 in overtime. I think you want to see more out of Chattanooga here. They had the big win last week, and then not to take a shot at the Citadel, but not a team Chattanooga should have been going into overtime against.
No, but at the same time, the Citadel is a triple option team. They are able to control the clock. And if Chattanooga is not well equipped to maybe stop the run or, try and make the Citadel actually speed up tempo, because again, we have seen that in the Big Sky. We have seen that in the SoCon. People who run the triple option, they can typically control how fast the pace is. So you're going to see a lot of closer games than probably, if they were a typical spread offense, you're going to see closer games just because they're going to keep that ball on the ground and run it. But yeah, I wasn't very impressed overall with Chattanooga in this game. I think they're at least showing some promise early in the season, which the last few years they've been a disappointment. But I thought they would have maybe handled the Citadel by 10, not really going to overtime. But we'll see. I mean, it's still a win. A win's a win at the end of the day. So good for Chattanooga.
Yeah, that still puts them in the driver's seat in the SoCon conference. Speaking of the SoCon, I mean, it's just overtime week here on FCS Sunday Overtime in the SoCon. Number 17, Furman, also sneaks out and gets the win against Samford, 44-37 in overtime as well. So back-to-back overtime games from the 18 and 17 teams. Once again, I think Furman, a team that you've been critical of, but a lot of people had high hopes of, should not be going in overtime against Samford.
Yeah, but I don't want to give Furman any credit because of my rant, a few weeks ago, and I always want to be proven right. But here's the deal about this game specifically. Furman was down big. The good thing is when you are down 24-7 after the first quarter, most teams start to fall. Most teams are like, we're not going to pull this out. You need one hell of a halftime performance to get that back in, or even right before the second quarter. Furman was able to hang tough. They were able to fight. They were able to, beat Samford pretty much after Q1. And they looked like the better team after Q1. So hell of a comeback. So I do want to give Furman some credit. because a lot of other teams would have just faltered. They wouldn't have been able to get, actually come back from having that devastating of a first quarter. So hats off to Furman. I still don't think you're top 10, but maybe you are proven. You have what it takes to prove me wrong a little bit.
So maybe they're top 20, which is where they are. So I like that. The Kyler take there is he views the falling down big early and coming back for the win as a good sign for Furman. So that is something to hear. All right, so we are coming back to this one. Number 16, SEMO. Turns out later in the day, even though in our first take of this morning, we said probably should handle business, they fall 24-21 at home to Murray State.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting them to fall to Murray State, but Murray State's coming out swinging. They're starting the season 2-0, but I mean, watching this game, it to me, it wasn't a, hey, which team's better than what, or which team wants to win. It seems like both teams were trying to lose this game. And, SEMO was just the most successful one at trying to lose a game. I mean, every quarterback struggled in this game. The offense was not clicking. At least Murray State had a solid rushing game, but SEMO offensively looked horrible. The quarterbacks on both sides looked horrible. And to me, it was, hey, which team wants to lose? And the team that wanted to lose the most was SEMO.
Yeah. Southeast Missouri's quarterback, number 5, Andrew Bunch, goes 15 for 27, 112 yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Yeah. Hard to win a game when you do that. It's actually, if you're SEMO looking for a benefit, the fact that you only lost by 3 with your starting quarterback having that stat line, maybe there's some stuff you can fix because you probably won't find yourself in that situation frequently. But next up is number 15, Illinois State. Another loss. This time we'll cover it again. Also, it was at the Unidome against number 3, Northern Iowa. Don't hate us for the rankings. We just cover how FCS Stats has them. I know that was very controversial this week of UNI being that high, but they do lose to UNI. The Illinois State Redbirds now 0-2 on the season. Fall by 10 points on the road. What does this say about Illinois State?
Well, what's it say about Illinois State is they lost James Robinson. I think we're going to say this every single week after they play a very tough defense. They do not have the offensive ability to be able to compete with the top echelon of the Missouri Valley in terms of when they're playing a great defensive team. They just do not have the offense. They're still a good team. They're still a strong team. They can hold teams to, few possessions to low points. But when you probably have the worst offense, in the Missouri Valley for sure, we might be talking about one of the worst offenses in all of the FCS just because of what they lost and what they weren't able to replace right away. It's going to be tough for Illinois State to continue to, win games against any of the top 5, 6 from the Valley.
Yeah, I agree. I'll be curious to see where they fall because of this, because they'll be 0-2, and it's a little hard to keep a team in that's 0-2. I think they still hold on to the top 25 vote, only losing the 10 to the number 3 team, but they need a win here soon.
Yeah.
And then another team who played at a top 25 team this week, number 14, New Hampshire, loses at home versus number 13, Albany, 24-20. So let's cover both 13 and 14 here. New Hampshire with the loss, Albany with the win. Friday Night Lights. This was a great game and a lot of weirdness too. It felt like the football gods tried to give this game to New Hampshire, but Albany was still able to pull away. There was a soccer kick with like a minute left that gave New Hampshire the ball on like the 17-yard line with time. And Albany is able to play great defense, get stops when it mattered, sacks when it mattered, and then have a great breakup in the back of the end zone, come away with the win. It was nice to see the CAA North in action. I think it shows that both these teams are probably going to be pretty good, and the CAA North is going to be very interesting to watch. It just sucks that, a team like New Hampshire has to wear this loss because they looked good. Albany looked good for being first games of the season, and I was very impressed with Undercuffler. I think he showed the part yesterday or Friday.
Yeah, this was a good game. The CAA North is actually pretty brutal when you look at it on paper compared to the South. Good luck trying to whoever picks who's getting out of the North. I have no clue. Everyone's going to look good. Everyone's going to look bad from week to week. Hats off to Jeff Undercuffler. This is what happens when you do bring back a stud. He is not a mobile quarterback. 6'5", 230. I mean, he's a big dude, but he's able to stay in the pocket. He's able to, be okay with pressure coming at him and still make the throws he needs to do. He was clutch. Undercuffler looked really good. He looks like he's going to be, still one of the best quarterbacks in the CAA. He's going to have a great career at the FCS level unless he transfers one day. But overall, good win. I mean, this game to me was a toss-up. Albany had probably a better chance, but I was picking New Hampshire to win just because, New Hampshire doesn't stay down for long. They're a good team who have been around for a long time. And it was a game that was 50-50 in Albany with Jeff Undercuffler. They were able to hold it off. So, hats off to these two teams. There's probably going to be a couple more battles in the North. I mean, good luck. Who's getting out of the North? I have no clue, but they both looked really good.
Yeah. This is even though they lost, this is still a win for New Hampshire. They looked good, just not the best on that day against who they were playing. Number 12, Sam Houston did not play. Number 11, we have Southern Illinois. So coming off the big win against North Dakota State last week, they were able to pull out a win at home versus Western Illinois, 45-10. So, big enough for you? Oh, sorry. Well, I read that totally wrong. Yeah, sorry. They won at Youngstown 30-22, jumping ahead to a different Missouri Valley team here. But was a 30-22 win against Youngstown good enough to keep them towards that 11 spot? Are they a top 10 team with this win?
I didn't have them in my top 10 last week, and I didn't see anything about this game to move them into my top 10 this week. Youngstown State is kind of like an Illinois State, but not as good in terms of their offense is just brutal. I mean, it's brutal in not a good way. They are not a good offense. I mean, they are going to have a really tough time. At least McLaughlin from Youngstown State was able to run the ball. He was able to find some holes. He was definitely the workhorse of that team. But with this Southern Illinois team, I don't know what to expect from them. I don't know if North Dakota State is not as good as, well, they don't look as good as years before, but I don't know exactly still how good North Dakota State is. I don't know how good Southern Illinois is just because of that UND game, then coming off, and then pretty poorly overall against Youngstown State. I mean, they were at least able to get some points on the board, which is promising because Youngstown State does have a stingy defense. But I mean, Youngstown State's offense, to flip that, is just horrendous. And I was surprised to see Youngstown State being able to control, the first quarter. It was a very close half. And then, Southern Illinois did what they needed to do at the second half, to pull out the win. But overall, it's a win. It's a good win, but it's not an impressive win enough to say, Southern Illinois, man, you jumped into my top 10. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think if you had Southern Illinois outside your top 10, that's probably where they're going to remain after this. I think 11 is fair for what they did to North Dakota State. And we'll get to North Dakota State here in a second. But the fact of the matter is Youngstown State's offense is only scoring 29 points this year in 3 weeks. 22 of those points came against the Salukis this week. So not a great showing for the Salukis, but a win is a win, and you can only beat who they put in front of you. Moving on to the next one that we're coming back to after our morning recording is number 10, Jacksonville State. They come out with a win, 38-16. They're a top 10 team right now. Did you expect more?
Yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, Jacksonville State took care of business. They actually had a fairly solid defensive showing. I mean, holding Tennessee State on third down, so, only 1 out of 15 attempts. I mean, that's a solid performance, even though Tennessee State is maybe not anything remotely to a, average to good caliber squad. Jacksonville State, this is what you do if you're a top 15 team. You're going to win, even if maybe sometimes the offensive, side of the ball didn't look amazing. They still took care of business. And overall, I like most of the decisions Webb's making over Cooper. I think they're a much more solid team. It's just going to be, is this team that can win out? And if they win out, do they get a top 4 seed? I think they probably do if they win out completely due to having some false schedules. Other people on the page may disagree with that, but hey, if Jacksonville State wins out, they control their own destiny. They're probably going to have home field advantage throughout at least most of the playoffs.
Yeah, JSU moves to 5-1 on the season. Most games played out of anybody that's still, playing in the spring here. As you said, with that FBS win and the way they're going, if they can run through the OVC like they should, they'll probably get a top 4 seed. Moving on to Number 9 was Kennesaw State. They did not play because the Big South has not played yet. And then you have South Dakota State has a win here. The Jackrabbits, big bounce back after the North Dakota State loss. North Dakota Fighting Hawks lost last week. They get a win at home versus Southern Illinois, 45-10. Absolutely handled this one from start to finish. There's not much to cover. The Jacks looked pissed off and looked like they wanted to solidify that they're still probably a top 5 team.
Yeah, this game was a lot like the Eastern Washington versus NAU. Coming off a tough loss, competitive loss, and then you're going in and playing just what you feel is an inferior team. And what you need to do is just beat the brakes off of them. And I mean, this game was almost identical. They were able to force, 3 interceptions. Offensively, they were rolling. Defensively, they were stopping. I mean, South Dakota State, they are a very good team. They did what they are supposed to do to a very not good team. And that very not good team is Western Illinois, who's, at the bottom of the valley. So South Dakota State, you took care of business. You proved to anyone who is potentially doubting you after that North Dakota loss that you are still there. You're still a very good team. And when you're a very good team, you need to blow the brakes off of teams who aren't. And that's exactly what they did.
So the only problem for them is big win, but nobody loses in front of them, which we'll get to.
Right.
They probably don't move, which sucks because they looked good. I mean, maybe some people adjust their brackets based on the flack that FCS or FCS Stats Perform got last week, but all these teams take care of business, some closer than others, but unfortunately, I don't see any movement in the top 10 this week. We'll see. But next up is Nichols, who had another big win. They had a win, less big than you'd expect. They beat Northwestern State 31-24. So 1 touchdown game here for Nichols after the previous 2 weeks blowing the brakes off of everybody. Maybe got caught sleeping on Northwestern State on this one, or is it more to say that maybe Nichols isn't quite as good as we're giving them credit for?
I think it's safe to say you can put those 2 things in there as well. Also, the third one, every single week so far, they've been playing a worse off competition the week before. So they're steadily increasing their level of competition. They're not going to blow the brakes off of everyone. I mean, Lindsey Scott Jr. still looked phenomenal in this game. He had a couple errors, but I mean, he's having really a Walter Payton type of start to the season now. Will it last because of the type of competition level he faced in the first 2 weeks? I don't know. I think it's a mixture of 3. Maybe we were tooting Nichols' horn a little bit too hard. Maybe they were just playing really bad competition, and every single week it's starting to increase. Maybe they slept on this team because they thought they were going to just roll through them like they have everyone else. I don't know. I think it's culmination, but overall, Nichols got the win. They're probably going to stay in the top 10 until proven otherwise. This looks to me like it's the Sam Houston versus Nichols race in the Southland, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, and then number 6, North Dakota State playing at Missouri State. They get the big win, 25-0. You'd expect them to maybe handle Missouri State a little bit better, especially as we mentioned. Coming off their loss, South Dakota State looked pissed off and handled business 45-10. Missouri State, while looking improved, probably still closer to the Western Illinois in talent. You would want to see the Bison beat this team something closer to 45-10 than 25-0. But at the end of the day, you shut them out and you won by 4 possessions. So,
yeah,
what more do you want from them? They won, but it just, it's not as pretty as I think people in Fargo would have liked.
Well, I mean, they're limiting Zeb. At least it looked like this game. They were limiting him to what he can actually do, which is probably a smart thing. I don't think they are going to try and really play typical Bison offense that we've seen the last few years. I think they're going to go back to that. If we want to win games, we have to rely on our defense. We have to rely on trying to control that clock. And if you look at this North Dakota State team, the second half, they were horrendous. And sure, they were up 25-0, so maybe that plays to their favor, but we've seen them up 25-0 before, and they keep flying through, even when they put in their backups, just because they are that much better offensively. This year, they do not have a good offense. They are struggling. I mean, I'm not that impressed with a 25-0 win over Missouri State. I mean, it's not saying it's a bad win because it's still 25 points, and now we're just getting too greedy. But I'm more concerned about how they played really the whole second half. I mean, outside of really another almost Hail Mary type of play from Zeb Nolan to go into halftime, it's really only an 18-0 game because they couldn't do anything the second half. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I don't think this North Dakota State can beat the South Dakota States of the world. I don't think they can, so I'm looking forward to that game. But a win's a win. They're going to stay right where they are.
And maybe the most shocking game in the top 5 this week, Villanova comes away with the win at Stony Brook, but only a 3-point victory, 16-13. First game of the year, can we chalk it up to rust, or should we be maybe seeing some red flags from Villanova?
I think we have to chalk it up at rust just look at the penalties. 16 penalties, 154 yards. I mean, when you look at their stats, they had 400 yards of total offense against a tough Stony Brook team. I'm not saying Stony Brook is the top level of the CA, but they're tough. So they did everything they wanted to offensively and defensively. They held Stony Brook to only 240 yards. The thing that is just huge is, for one, they weren't rushing the ball very well. Daniel Smith, he was looking a little lackluster throughout most of the game too, but that's a little rusty. But I mean, 16 penalties. 154 yards. You almost gave the other team more yards and penalties than they even had in total offense. That's showing this is probably a little more rusty. I think Villanova, we're going to see a better team next week. At least I hope. Maybe they are just a team who is going to make mental mistakes. Maybe they are just a team who's being too aggressive and they need to be coached a little bit better. But right now, I got to say it's rust until I see a few weeks from them, because that's a lot of penalties.
Yeah. Moving into number 4, the team that probably deserves the most talking time, but somehow still won't get it because they're at number 4, North Dakota, the only team in the FCS that is 3-0 with all of their wins against top 20 competition. I mean, they beat number 20 South Dakota by 11. Is it time just go, look, like, it wasn't a fluke against South Dakota State, or it wasn't a fluke when they beat Southern Illinois. Like, they just beat South Dakota. Like, give them the 1 spot. They're the only team with a resume and the look of a number 1 team. We haven't seen Weber enough. We'll touch on the other teams ahead of them here shortly, but I mean, to me, they're a no-brainer at my 1 spot right now.
Yeah, and I think that's very fair. I mean, if you are looking at historical data, no way North Dakota is number 1. They just haven't been. They've had one season where they have been a top 8 caliber team, and then they got blown out in the playoffs. But if you are taking this year as what it is, look at the resume, look at their wins. Sure, I don't think this should have been considered a top 20 win because I didn't have South Dakota in my top 25 to begin with. But the polls did. So guess what? It's a top 20 win right now until they drop out. But resume, pure resume, and how North Dakota's looked for most, I'm going to say the second half of every single game. They look like a completely different team in the second half, and it's a scary team in the second half. But North Dakota by far has the best resume. They are by far the team deserving most of a number 1 bid. Will they get it? No. But no matter what, they should be above UNI. I mean, that's still ridiculous. I'll still toot my horn on that, every single week. But can we give props to Otis, running back? This little bowling ball, 5'8", 215 pounds or whatever he is. I mean, he ran all the way down South Dakota's throat. And again, I don't think South Dakota is that great. But if you are a top caliber team, this is a type of win you need to have. They did not struggle throughout this game. It never felt like a close game after really that first quarter. You just thought, all right, North Dakota is going to pick itself up. They are going to handle it. And they did. They basically beat South Dakota in every aspect of the game. And, they controlled the time of possession by almost 10 minutes. I mean, this looks like a Valley team who is going to run it down your throat, be physical on both lines. I'm just waiting for typical North Dakota to come, because it's going to happen at least once in the season to where we'll go, we told you so. But until now, they've proven it. They have proven the doubters wrong until they lose. They should be in your number 1 consideration, everyone's number 1 consideration right now.
Yeah, and their defense beat up South Dakota, and they just looked the deal. And terrific Tommy, the quarterback, I'm loving it. Like little flashbacks of Johnny Manziel going. They've got a shot, but like you, a little worried just because historically they've had some letdowns. But I mean, it's hard looking at this team saying that that's what's going to happen because, like I said, 3 top 20 wins. That's any team in the country would be asking for that right now. And I feel like almost 20 of these 25 teams in the top 20, if they had all 3 top 25 wins, they would be number 1. So I think it's time North Dakota gets a little bit of their due. But
that's the thing. I bet you, maybe outside of a team like Furman or SEMO or in Idaho who had those resumes, because they haven't really proved it in the last few years. I mean, I guess SEMO hasn't. Same with Furman, but most of those teams, if they had that resume, I mean, look at Northern Iowa's resume, who we're going to talk about next. They're above North Dakota. The disrespect that North Dakota is facing, and it's just because it's North Dakota. They've been living in the shadows of the Big Sky. They've been living in the shadows of North Dakota State. Yeah, pure resume. They're number 1, pure resume.
Yeah, you look at the number 25 team in the country right now, the Delaware Blue Hens. If they had 3 top 20 wins, they would be number 1 in the country. That's just the facts. UNI, number 3 wins versus number 15 Illinois State, 20-10. What do you see out of UNI? I think it goes to show, for me at least, that they are still a team that's going to be good. But once again, I think this speaks more about Illinois State maybe not being quite as good as we're giving them credit for. So UNI gets the win. To me, they're still not a top 5 team. So seeing them at 3 is high. Are they a top 10 team? Probably. Number 3 seems high. I would have liked to see them win by probably 30, 40 points to justify a top 3 spot.
Well, I don't know about that 30 to 40 points. I mean, right now, even if they won by that much, I can't justify them being above North Dakota just because of the pure resumes and who they lost to versus who North Dakota beat. So no matter what, I just can't justify them being above North Dakota. But here's the thing about Northern Iowa. They are a good team. They are always a good team. They are always a physically tough team. You're going to be getting in battles with Northern Iowa if you are the number 1 team or if you are the 50th team. Northern Iowa just plays a tough, stingy type of football. But yeah, I mean, Northern Iowa, they took care of business. When the spread was only 8, I actually thought I would have bet on Northern Iowa getting the over just because of how bad Illinois State's offense is compared to how good Northern Iowa's defense is. Northern Iowa's strengths in this is 100% Illinois State's weaknesses. And Illinois' strengths, well, guess what? Northern Iowa is just a little bit better. So I was not very impressed by this win, but they still did what they had to do, and they played typical UNI ball. Tough defense, struggling offense, but Northern Iowa doesn't care how they win because they are going to continue to win these tough battles, tough type of games. So
Yep. And number 2, Weber State, their game against Cal Poly was postponed, which gets us to the number 1 team in the country. James Madison gets the win at Elon, 20-17, and was trailing. You gave Furman credit for coming back from a big deficit and coming away with a close win in overtime. Do you give the same credit to James Madison falling down to Elon and squeaking it out? I mean, they ran out the clock at the end. That's the benefit of the game, is they controlled how that game ended. They kept it on the ground and just ran out the clock to close it once they've got the lead. But I mean, James Madison, as we've touched on, will have no challenge. This was the team that was supposed to challenge them, and Elon does not look what we expected them to be. I think you're going to have a hard time keeping a team like James Madison above teams like Weber and North Dakota, and maybe even a South Dakota State the way they're playing. So, I mean, it's a win. Once again, you can't fault the team for winning. They, as you said, you got to give them credit for falling down and showing the fight to come back. However, I think falling down and showing the fight to come back when you're like a number 20 team compared to the number 1 team doesn't hold up the same. I find this to be bad. Where I do agree with you, the Furman thing, it was good to see them not just throw in the towel. But James Madison had to fight back on this one, and I don't think that reflects well on them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can compare those 2 teams or those 2 games at all. For one, I think Samford is better than Elon this year. So when Furman's battling back from Samford, which Samford could be an explosive team, that's better because Samford has a better offense than what Elon has showed, so far this year. Because Elon, unfortunately, once Cheek was injured, then they went their backup quarterback. He's no longer there. Elon is on their 3rd string quarterback. They are not having a good offense. JMU is a defensively sound monster. I mean, that's what we've seen. Even last week at the second half of the Robert Morris game, they were a defensive monster. But here's the thing. Elon is not a defensive monster. Elon is showing some real flaws to James Madison's offense that we just saw last week with Robert Morris. JMU's offense, especially their quarterback play, they're looking a lot like North Dakota State in terms of that quarterback. I am not confident he's going to beat any of the top 10 teams, especially if he develops a little hole like he has the last few games. It was promising seeing Gage Maloney in there. I know Lawrence Smith, that was his boy, a couple years ago. He kept saying, Gage Maloney is going to be the next big thing at JMU. So it's nice to see him get some snaps and maybe replace Johnson, because Johnson is struggling. But no, I can't give these two the same type of credit, because right now, this should have been a game JMU had no problem with. This should have been a game JMU was up 20-0 in the first quarter. And people might think that's an unfair thing to say, but when Gardner Webb blows the brakes off of Elon the week before, 42-20, Gardner Webb is not anything near the caliber of team as James Madison is. So I know JMU fans are still going to be saying, we haven't lost, we deserve number one till proven otherwise. I think these last 2 weeks have proven otherwise. You are not playing remotely near top 25 caliber teams and you're struggling. You're not playing top 45 teams and you're struggling. I'm not saying JMU is not a good team. I'm not saying JMU can't win the national championship. But right now, there's some big flaws, and the level of their competition is exposing those flaws. And are they going to be battle tested enough with that level of competition to be able to battle back from those flaws when they actually play real caliber, legit playoff type of teams? Right now, I don't think JMU looks that good. But, let's give some credit to Percy where it's due. He is having already a phenomenal year so far, already 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's averaging six yards a rush. If JMU wants to be competitive with the top 10, top 25, it almost seems like they need to completely abandon the passing game and just focus on what they do best. You need to control those lines. Defense, I don't know if that's going to work. You need to be a little bit more dynamic than what they've shown. So, yeah, I'm not giving JMU the same credit as I gave Furman. Just because they should have never even been down. They should have never even been in any type of competition with Elon when Elon's down to their third string quarterback and looks really bad to start the year with their matchups versus Davidson, with their matchups versus Gardner Webb. This is not a good Elon team, unfortunately, due to a couple different issues that have happened.
Yeah. But hey, that was FCS the Sunday. Shout out, as you brought it up. Gardner Webb gets the win against Presbyterian in overtime. So Gardner Webb, maybe we'll be covering you here shortly in the top 25. Well, we'll see. Keep handling business. But that was your top 25 weekly recap, FCS Sunday, the overtime. We'll be always posting Sunday. The frickin' Ohio Valley's really making it difficult for us with these Sunday games, but I'm not going to complain having football Thursday through Sunday, and we'll keep bringing these to you guys. We'll see you guys next week with our top 25 recap.
Awesome. Boom.